Okay, so what's up there? David again. Just got established into my philosophy pub. I've been doing some excessive reading again today on Schopenhauer. I'm thinking possibly of doing my thesis on him, or actually when it becomes time to choosing a philosopher, if I in the case that I pursue my master's, or when it is deemed necessary to choose a philosopher to pursue his work, I may just choose Schopenhauer's. Very interesting guy. Very thorough examination of life, what the philosopher's job is technically set out to do. And I feel that he actually touches upon a lot of areas where some philosophers so far that I've read, that is to say, I really can trace his line of thoughts coherently and practically speaking. So anyhow, I'm going to read today a little section of the book and perhaps chop it in pieces for each, because I think each part of this is very important. Now, Schopenhauer, first of all, his work is not to be taken as it has so many times since his work has been published, taken out of context and little cliches here and there, like subject without object and mind-dependent realities and things, without actually understanding the whole of his systematic philosophy. It's very easy to characterize and create a cliche out of his beautiful writing prose. Okay, the camera just rudely cut me off. Excuse me. I was talking about Schopenhauer and how it's important to understand him as to understand his words step by step by getting yourself introduced with his systematized philosophy, as opposed to taking little sections and tidbits here and there and making sense of it and intellectually destroying his original authorship, which is disgusting for any author that really takes the pains and stakes to create his own system. How everything fits in his ontology, as it were. Okay, so this chapter is chapter 2 of his book, the first chapter being pretty much his a short biography on him by Brian Magee. This book is by Brian Magee. It's called The Philosophy of Schopenhauer. Now, Brian Magee, you'll find him on YouTube interviewing many different philosophers. Now, this guy has a brilliant way to articulate himself, for one, and second, he's very clear, which is another thing that you gotta really love about any philosopher, their ability to have clarity when they speak, and at the same time ask just the appropriate questions that spark the curiosity of the viewer. And in that case, he at least did that for me. So, in chapter 2, it's called The Ends of Explanation. And here, he's going to be speaking about Schopenhauer's first dissertation, which is really his first work ever published, which is called On the Fourfold Root of the Principle of Sufficient Reason. The Principle of Sufficient Reason was put into common currency of philosophy by Leibniz. I forget his first name. Leibniz, I forget his first name. Anyhow, what it basically gets at is the principle of sufficient reason is there is a reason for everything. That's basically what it states. There is a reason for my speaking right now. There is a reason for the Earth being the way it is in its axis rotation right now. There is everything is causally determined in a sort of way. That's not to say that every cause has an effect. I mean, I also was reading some Wikipedia articles, and especially the part where they critically revised, and I heard some pretty misaimed, I should say, criticism, and somebody appropriately pointed this out. This is where I'm now explaining this from this person explaining how the criticism went wrong, how the principle of sufficient reason really gets at explaining the reality that everything is causally determined. That is not to say or to be confused that every cause has an effect, that cliche, or that idea of causation, because that is completely obvious. Yes, every cause does have an effect. The effect is naturally a cause. It's like a binary of the same thing. Every cause is an effect. The cause is an effect of another cause. The effect is by a previous cause. Okay, forget that for a second. It went a little too far adrift. Okay, so now, anyhow, the fourfold root of the principle of sufficient reason might as well have been called says Brian Magee, it might as well have been called on the nature of explanation, because this is really what it hints at. It doesn't necessarily have to be about everything has a reason, so much as, I mean, that's really what it gets at, but he, as far as defining what a sufficient reason is, because eventually we'll have to tackle the question, what is surmountable, what is appropriate to deem a sufficient reason, he will eventually say that there is something called necessary connection, which Schopenhauer will say, that is, that there is something called necessary connection. And there are 4 types of necessary connections in order to construe or to find truth, reap truth in any given context. And this would be, oh, and by the way, this is what would constitute the basis of an explanation. This necessary connection, this sufficient reason. Okay, so that being said, there are 4 of them, which I'm going to walk through, but I'm going to read this in order. So now, giving you that sort of preview, that foreword, now allow me to get through it, and hopefully it makes a little more sense. I'll stop if I feel the need to explain.